Resilience is something that's really glorified. It's an ugly, glorified thing. And it's really hard, right? Because you have children, you have young adults, you have adults that are so resilient. They've been through so much, but it's like, why do they have to keep on going through these things? Why do they have to be so strong?
Just dealing with PTSD, you never really know what your day is going to be like. You can wake up and think that you're going to be okay, but then you get a flashback. Now you're down for the whole day. And nobody else really around you know that you're down, because when you step outside, you got to keep going. You got to move forward. So sometimes I have to put on an image that I'm okay, just to avoid being questioned, or just to avoid, wanting to cry. I just put on an image like I'm fine and let my emotions out another way or some other day.
The stories traumatize the young, so now they grow up hating people that they don't even know.
It's a system in place that punishes poor and uninformed people, poverty. The reason I do the work I do, because I took so much from my community, and I would love to give back. And I know I have a lot of lived experience that I could help a lot of the high-risk youth with. I used to be them.
There was never a day I didn't wake up and I didn't cry. Like, I was depressed, I was grieving, I was healing. I was doing a lot at once, so it was hard. And it still is hard, but I can say now I do see more better days than I did before, and that's progress.
Oh man, I died that day. To me, it's a rebirth. It's divine. It's divine because I want to thank the guy that shot me. I was on a bad path. I was living like lightning and I crashed like thunder.
I love Chicago so much, and I often look at how beautiful the city is, like just as far as aesthetics, but I think about how many horrible things happen and the lack of resources in these communities for people to heal from these tragic incidents. So I have a bittersweet relationship with Chicago for sure.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to WBEZ's Those Who Did Not Die, an evening with survivors of Chicago gun violence. I'm Patrick Smith, one of the reporters on WBEZ's Criminal Justice Desk. This past weekend marked the beginning of summer, and unfortunately, in addition to being the best season in the best city in the country, summer in Chicago is typically marred by violence. Over the long Memorial Day weekend, 9 people were killed in the city. Another 42 were shot and wounded. 42 people who will carry their injuries, physical, emotional, and mental. Last week, there was, of course, the school shooting in Uvalde, and before that, the shooting at a grocery store in Buffalo. These mass shootings have captured the nation's attention, and rightfully so. Here in Chicago, we deal with gun violence that can sometimes feel almost routine. But of course, for those who have lived through it, it is not. It is their stories we will hear tonight. Tonight's event was inspired by a series I reported out at the end of 2020 about survivors of gun violence. More broadly, tonight's event is inspired by the gun violence epidemic here in Chicago and inspired by the courage of the survivors of that epidemic. When we talk about gun violence in Chicago, we tend to focus on murders. And for good reason. The people killed in Chicago cannot be brought back. Their deaths devastate families and communities. Murders extinguish hope and potential. But as I learned in my reporting, for every person killed in a city shooting, 5 are shot and survive. It's more than 50,000 people shot and wounded since the turn of the century. I'm hesitant to say too much about the experience of those 50,000 survivors, mostly because we are about to hear from a few of them, and they are much more equipped to tell their stories than I am. But what first drove me to help share some of these stories was the sense that we as a general public, we just have no idea what it's like to be shot, what it takes to recover, what supports are needed for people who survive gunfire. And considering just how many walking wounded we have here in the city, with new ones being created just about every day, it is something that we need to better understand. None of our storytellers tonight were featured in our original series. Our goal is to expand our perspective and deepen our collective understanding. And every story is unique. I think often of the stories that survivors shared with me for that original series. A young man who was caught in the crossfire and blamed himself for not being more aware of potential danger right by his house. A father who was holding his young daughter in his arms when rival gang members tried to kill him. A teenage girl who's afraid to go outside after being shot in a park near her house. The most challenging part of the project for me was trying to get people to tell their stories without re-traumatizing them. I thought about it a lot, tried to seek out people who said they were up for reliving this really difficult, maybe most horrific moment they had ever had in their entire lives. Only the subjects that I interviewed could tell you if I succeeded in my goal there. I do still speak to some of them on a semi-regular basis, and they are inspiring. For tonight's event, when we were doing a run-through of tonight's event, actually, a couple days ago, our first speaker that you're going to hear from in just a minute, Rodney Phillips, he said to his fellow survivors, "I wish these stories weren't our stories." He wished that they didn't have these stories of trauma and survival to share in the first place. And I've been thinking about that exact idea, both in terms of this event and in terms of criminal justice reporting overall, a lot. How do we balance the costs and benefits of asking people to share the worst moments of their lives? Is it worth it? To be clear, these are not just stories of trauma. These are stories of strength, resilience, redemption. These are stories of hope. These stories are also true. They do not represent all of what is happening in Chicago, but they represent a very real problem that we are facing here in the city, and we should not shy away from it. The whole concept of journalism is that things get better when you shine a light on things that are going wrong. Sometimes it feels like that calculus isn't working here in Chicago because there is a lot of news coverage of Chicago violence, and it's hard to say that things are getting significantly better or better at all. I do still believe in the foundation of journalism, though, and it makes me think that we maybe aren't shining our spotlight on the right things. We maybe aren't hearing from the right people. That's what part of what tonight is about. The people you are about to hear from, they have powerful insights to share. These are the people we should be listening to when we are grappling with Chicago gun violence. So thank you to all of them for sharing their stories. Thank you to their friends and family who are in the audience right now. Thank you to everyone listening and watching at home. Our first survivor who's sharing his story with us, I just mentioned, is Rodney Phillips. He's a lifelong Chicagoan who's worked in violence intervention and trauma training for more than a decade. Rodney currently works with the Metropolitan Peace Academy. He told WBEZ that after several brushes with violence when he was younger, he had just lost hope. Now, Rodney finds hope by watching his grandsons play. It is my pleasure to have Rodney here tonight to share his story.
Good evening. My story is about turning your pain into your purpose. And I'll break it down in two parts. The first part is the hurt. The second part is the healing. My first, I won't say it's my first traumatic event, but the one that most affected me occurred August 1989. And it was a normal day for me as I was growing up in a housing project, statewide guard, concrete jungle, vertical ghettos. But it was home to me, and I learned a lot of hard-earned lessons there. But on this day, I learned my hardest lesson, and I would live with a loss that affected me, even though it took place over 25 years ago. It still affects me now because I found out that I never healed because I never dealt with it. But today I shared. On that day, I was doing my normal routine with my cousin, as we do. We walk from building to building, greeting our friends and things of that nature. And we was under a building that we called the Deuce in the projects. And we was sitting under the building, and you know, everything's happened. One thing about death, it's all of a sudden. If you ever experience it, it happened in 0.2 seconds. And it was just like, I remember this like yesterday. He said, "I'll be back." And he entered the hallway. And when he entered the hallway, I was sitting in the breezeway, and I seen him come out the hallway. And as soon as I seen him come out the hallway, it didn't occur to me to nothing different. But then I heard a bang. Then I heard another bang. Then I seen him hit the stairs and fall down the stairs. And I was just numb and shocked because I couldn't really grasp what had just happened. But he had got shot in the back. And what I remember is his face as he's laying on the floor. He was trying to talk, but he couldn't really get out to what he was saying. So I leaned it over him, and he was telling me, you know, what he was feeling, but I can hear the life. I can see the life going out of him. And he just kept saying, man, cuz Rod, man, I'm shot. It's burning. Something exploded in me. Later, I found out what was happening is he was hit with a hollow point bullet. It entered his back, and it blew out his intestines and things like that. But I didn't know at the time what was going on. But that stays with me. But only then I would realize that after that, you know, I had lost my innocence because that was my first time witnessing something and witness a loss like that. And imagine being with somebody every day of your life for like from the 4th grade, we was inseparable, and not to have him there. So I remember the next morning going to the spot where he was murdered at, and it just was blood there. I'll never forget, it was raining real bad. And it just dawned on me like, damn, his name is Dorian, but we call him Doe. Like, damn, Doe, I ain't gonna never see you again. And from there on, you know, I didn't know how to deal with it because where I come from, you know, we didn't hire grief counselors. Nobody addressed our trauma. And how I was raised is you don't show emotion. So I had to keep that bottled up, you know. And I didn't know how to deal with it. But that would start a downward spiral because every friend I grew up with will have the same fate, you know, died to this terrible disease called gun violence. And when I say grew up with, I'm not talking about knowing them from the neighborhood. I'm talking about 12 to 15 individuals that's in your inner circle that you communicate with every day. A day don't go past without you communicating with them. And I would lose them to gun violence also, you know. And through that ordeal, it's just been an ongoing cycle. It's been an ongoing cycle. So, you know, I never knew how to deal with it. And I actually got desensitized to it, and I accepted it as being a normal. You know, me coming up where I come from, you know, I didn't have a refuge or nowhere to go. But I remember me living in my building. It was a library that was under my building. And for some reason, me and the library throughout my life always had a connection, whether it was either in the projects or when I was in prison. I always seek the solitude of the library. Through there, I would escape and write things and read just to escape my reality, because sometimes it was too much to bear, you know. I've been to penitentiary several times, half of my life. And one thing, when I talk to the youth, I try to let them know that the graveyards and the penitentiaries are undefeated. You're not gonna beat them. There's no way around it, you know. And I also ask them, you know, do you have the guts? The guts mean that's an acronym for get up out the streets, you know, because the streets don't love nobody, you know. Then another thing that occurred that hit near home to me was when I was in federal prison. I got a son, my only son, and he was shot 6 times in the stomach while I was in there. So I didn't know if he was gonna live or not. I remember this, but I think it was June of 2015. And in the prison system, we communicate by email. I had got an email by my daughter, and it informed me that my son had been shot and he in surgery. And that was one of the aha moments. And I asked God, I say, man, if you spare him, I'm gonna do everything I can and repurpose my life to help children get out the streets and fight against gun violence. And I got a call, and he made it. So when I came home, I kept my promise. And before I went to prison, I had already started doing violence prevention. You know, I was introduced for violence prevention by an older mentor by the name of Jerome Freeman. You know, he was a guy that I looked up to, and he referred me to T.O. Hardeman at Ceasefire. And he said, man, Rod, I think you would be a good guy to do this job because you're a voice of reason, you're a stand-up guy, and you fair, and you had relationships. So I was like, man, I'll give it a try, especially it coming from him. Him seeing them things in me meant a lot to me. So, you know, I dived into it, and it instantly, I was hooked on it. But, you know, like with anything else, you know, I relapsed, you know. I relapsed, I was indicted, went back to the penitentiary, got out and tried again. That's why, you know, when Patrick spoke of being resilient, I learned that, man, you have to be resilient in this work and in life, period. Endurance is a skill. It's a skill, like, that's one of my greatest assets, I think, because I won't give up. But, you know, I started connecting with the young men, trying to get them to change their life because I understood them. When I would talk to them, I knew exactly what they was going through. It's like being in a dark cave, and everybody can't understand when you're in that life. They think you could just lead that life like that. No, it don't just go like that, because it's the psychological scars that you don't see. It's the things that you can't take back. The things that I've seen in my life, you can't erase that. That's there. That's permanently there. And them things could be a hindrance. You know, some people don't recover from them. But part of my healing is working with young men, teaching at the Metropolitan Peace Academy. I believe that job saved my life because it gave me purpose. It gave me purpose where I could share my story and inspire others. But at the same time, it put me close to my triggers. And it's like a recurring thing when you keep dealing with loss and you see people with no hope. They desperate. And it's just like, gun violence just shakes your whole life up, man. It's something that, now that I look at it, one thing that stood out to me, man, when I was growing up, you ever seen a parent lose a child, they never be the same no more after that. All my child friends, when I looked at their mothers and stuff, they never was the same. And another thing is, I suffer from survivor's guilt, because when I would be around my friends, they siblings or their kids, I know they wonder, like, why you ain't gone and my people still here? My people ain't here, why you still here? And, I used to grapple with that and think like, damn, it's terrible. I didn't have no answer for that. But one thing I did have an answer for was this, that I was gonna take my experiences and roll up my sleeves and try to save as many lives as possible and try to turn my pain into purpose, man. One thing I was never afraid of death, because I embraced it. Everywhere I came from, that was the norm. I expected to die like the rest of my friends or anybody else. And sometimes, I think about that. But now, I never learned how to live. I'm just learning how to live. I knew how to survive. That's easy for me. I'm in my element surviving. But living a normal life of peace is something I struggle with every day, because I'm affected by the trauma and I can't erase the pain that I went through.
Leave me on in a pile.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Rodney. Now, we're going to hear from our next storyteller, Takhari Moore. She's a nursing student, and she's involved with the anti-gun violence organization Chicago Cred. Takhari's story is a bit different because her encounter with gun violence happened outside of Chicago, but she brought her experiences back home with her, and we're so grateful to have her here tonight to share her story. Please welcome Takhari Moore to the stage.
Good evening. I grew up on the south side of Chicago in the Roseland, West Pullman area. My trauma started early with gun violence. When I was 5 years old, I lost my father to gun violence. And that's when it I was young, but as I got older, it kind of got worse. It inflicted, like, I didn't have my father at my graduation when I graduated in kindergarten. I didn't have my father to see me to go off to prom or to see me go off to college. As I got older, it got worse. I was raised in a single-parent household, of course, with the help of my grandmother and other family members. Growing up, I was kind of blessed up to see 2 points of living. I went to private school majority of my life, so I was able to see kids, raised in good family households with careers. Meanwhile, I had family who was working, still. My mama, I basically grew up with my mom. She had me when I was 19, so I was growing up with her while she was raising me. I played sports since the age of 10, so I never really went outside like that because every sport that you could think of, I did. Volleyball, track, cheerleading, whatever. I was doing it. I ain't really had time to go outside, but when I did have time, I did go outside. Then after high school, I always knew I wanted to go away to college. I'm like, man, when I graduate, I'm going far away. I picked Jackson State. Jackson State was such a phenomenal experience. I tell anybody, if you ever have a chance to go away to college, please go. You're going to have the time of your life. You're going to have a good time. I majored in biology, minored in nursing. I worked several jobs throughout my college career because once I got to college, I'm like, I'm staying down here. I ain't going back. So I did what I had to do. I started working and going to school full time. Then after my sophomore year, I moved there. And when I moved there, while working at Nike, I met my boyfriend, Darius. Our relationship was very fun and adventurous. We always went out to eat steak. Steak was our favorite food, so we always was at steakhouses enjoying steak. We was dating for like a year or so. We started to plan our first vacation. I'll never forget the day, January 26th. We was preparing for our vacation. We partied the night before. We woke up. I already had my hair done. Darius, he had missed his barbershop appointment. And I'm like, well, we got to get on the road to go to New Orleans, Forget the haircut. He like, man, no, I ain't going out of town without no fresh haircut. I don't even got no lining. I got to make it to the barbershop. Okay, he ended up getting an appointment, rescheduled, went to the barbershop. After I picked him up from the barbershop, traffic was crazy. I'll never forget. Traffic was crazy. He got in the car. He said, man, my barber taxed me. He said, I went off on him. He said, this man ain't never taxed me a day in my life. But he taxed me. He said, that hurt. And I was like, wow. I know what type of person Darius is. I know he ate him up. I know he went off on him. So when he got in the car, I'm like, which way should I go? Should I go towards the traffic or wait for the traffic? He like, man, go towards the traffic. That's the closest way to home. Moments later, after we left the barbershop, 3 guys approached my car, shooting. Man, it changed my life forever. It just happened last year. Long live Darius. I was shot 11 times, and I witnessed somebody so close to me take their last breath. It's different when you experience death, but when you experience death, and you're going through your own healing, it was hard. I'm still learning how to overcome it. People always telling me, you know, you strong. And I'm blessed. I knew I was blessed. Because when I got in the ambulance, man, I was exhausted and weary. I didn't even know I was shot as many times as I was till they took me out the car. When they took me out the car, I just heard the paramedics counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when I got in the ambulance, the lady had told me, she was like, yeah, you've been shot 11 times. And I just sat there, it was like white light, ambulance super bright, it was white light. I just looked up. And I told the paramedics, I said, man, I'm tired. I said, I'm tired. You know, just wake me up when we get to the hospital. Man, I thank God for her. She was a blessing. She immediately stopped what she was doing, and she leaned over. I'll never forget, she leaned over. She said, you can't take no nap. She said, I'm not finna let you give up on your life, because if you take a nap, you might not wake up. I feel like that was my dad, like an angel, because I just wanted to give up. I didn't have no hope. Immediately after the situation, I reached out to my friend, DJ. He was the first person I called after I called the paramedics and Daria's mama. When I got out of the ambulance, he was the first person I seen, and it was like, it was a little, I felt a little better to know I had somebody in my corner, because my family was all the way in Chicago. I was down alone, and I knew DJ. I knew he could handle the situation. But then when I got to the hospital, I was back alone. DJ was out in front of the hospital, and it took for me till I got out the hospital, and me and DJ was talking. He told me, he said, man, I almost beat the ambulance there. I seen everything. He said, yeah, I seen you. I seen D on the ground. I seen it all. And I felt so bad. That's when my guilty conscience started to kick in. I felt guilty about everything. And I'm like, dang, I done put this trauma on him too. Now he got a little PTSD from everything. My nurses was a blessing too though, while I was in the hospital. They instilled me, you know, I'm strong. They seen how I was maneuvering, let me know, build my confidence, helped me relearn how to do things like getting out the bed, feeding myself, and using the bathroom. But moving back to Chicago was hectic for me. I was in a dark place because I felt like I failed. I felt myself, I felt my family. I never wanted to come back here. But as I came back, good things started to happen. I got my CNA license. I got a 4.0 GPA this last semester for the first time ever. 4.0, all A's. I felt good. And also, I became a part of a participant of Chicago Cred, and I feel like Chicago Cred saved my life. Because when I first started, I was in a dark place. Every time they'd see me, I'd just be boo-hooing, crying. Like, why y'all want to talk to me? What am I here for? But as time got on, I know that it was a good place for me to be in, and I just started to do the work. And as I'm doing the work, it's more doors opening up to me.
Thank you so much, Takhari. Our next survivor to share his story is David Aguirre. Like Rodney, David was also on the other side of gun violence in his past life. He's used the word rebirth many times when describing how his outlook has changed in the past several years. David now works for Envision Community Services in Brighton Park as a lead outreach worker. It is so great to have you here tonight, David.
What's going on, y'all? Appreciate that warm welcome. First and foremost, if I can, I'd like to share a moment of silence for the 9 lives lost over the holiday weekend, starting now. All right. I was told that the audience, viewers, and listeners are interested in gun violence stories, survivors. And that's what I have for you. That's the story that I'm bringing you guys tonight, my story. Well, it all started at a very early age. Typical poverty-stricken, lower-class community family. Same old story as some people can relate to. Father went out for milk, never came back. Mother was young and malleable to the point where she let the streets mold her, and ultimately her lifestyle, and it ended up touching me and my brothers. So it ended up changing 3 young lives, me and my 2 brothers. We ended up having to endure something that children shouldn't endure at any age, for that matter. I went through stuff that an 11-year-old shouldn't have to. I was burdened with responsibilities that adults run from. And what I say made me a strong little boy ended up making me a weak man, in the sense of not being able to critical think my way out of situations. All the situations that I ended up encountering, I chose violence and just caveman mentality ways to get me out of the jams. All right, and then came a world of hurt. I became one with the streets. I ended up embracing the streets and becoming the streets. I was your typical little kid that, in the area I grew up in, I was 11 years old, still out past midnight, school uniform, stained shirts. Just a childhood that ends up messing with the mental of a little boy at the moment. Then came prison, and in my definition, prison made me a lot more smarter and stronger than the average person, because you don't have anyone in prison. All you have is yourself and the tools that you came in with and the tools you were born with, which is your brain. It was told to me that a warrior's main useful weapon is his mentality, not force. So with me taking stuff out of context, I ended up living a life that was just all over the place. I didn't know how to filter nor digest the dilemmas that I found myself in, so all I did was answer them with violence and just hatred towards my own culture. People that I didn't even know I hated. I ended up being my worst enemy, my own worst enemy. I lived a life that ended up being a double-edged sword. And with a mentality like that, I was destined for every hole in my body, and I feel that I deserved everything that I went through. I earned it. I ended up doing so much bad that I can sleep at night saying that I paid my debt to the Lord, or whoever my creator is. I believe that I died that day. People tell me that I was given another chance, and I say that I put in my own words that I rebirthed, only because I have no hatred towards the person he or she that shot me. In my belief, I feel that I owe that person a thank you for giving me another chance during this lifetime to make it all better. So instead of me, I genuinely feel that I owe that person something as I walk this journey on this earth. I have no hatred towards the person that shot me, he or she. On October 3rd, 2019, I was shot 16 times. And now I am left with a slowly dying leg, minimal use in my hand, shattered chest, shattered shoulder. And I took the good out of the bad. All the stuff that did happen to me, I turned it around and said to myself that I have a new outlook on life, a new perspective towards life and everybody in this life. And really, this was a short story. I didn't really have too much time to put it together because I had so much other stuff going on in the city and my new job. So this is my gun violence story, and thank you sincerely. And for gracing me with your time and attention, I am honored. God watch over Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story, David. Our final storyteller of tonight is Tierra Lemon. Tierra told WBEZ that she was a curious kid who, unfortunately, experienced situations that no child should have to go through. Her curiosity about trauma, though, helped her find her passion and her way here tonight. She's a violence recovery specialist, and she founded a nonprofit organization called The Therapeutic Trap. It helps young people use creativity to process their trauma. I'm honored to welcome Tierra Lemon to share her story.
What are you willing to sacrifice for the population you want to serve? I grew up on the south side of Chicago in the Ashburn neighborhood. At the time, the grass was always cut and there was never much litter. So you'd assume that a neighborhood that looked nice would lack things like violence, trauma, and loss. But in all actuality, it's the very neighborhood where I was introduced to it all. This is the same neighborhood where kids would gather at Dooley Park just as the summer would start. The same neighborhood where I would put on a fresh pair of Air Force Ones just to go to the park. But who knew that this park would be the same park that I would spend what was supposed to have been a regular day with my friends, running from what seemed like to be nonstop gunfire that resulted in 4 of my childhood friends being struck. While this was one of my earliest introductions to gun violence, unfortunately, it would not have been the last. Life for me and many others changed in January 2016 when a very close friend was killed. Not just the close friend, the type of friend that felt more like family. His name was Darius Brown. We called him D-Wade. My favorite thing about Wade was his genuineness, the definition of a true stand-up guy, you know? But during this time, Wade's death, it caused so much hurt. It caused so much grieving. You could feel it. You could see it. And me naturally being a person that always wants to help and always wants to fix things, I was lost. I was lost with everybody else. And of course, I didn't know how to heal trauma. I barely could understand trauma. But it wasn't until after this tragedy that I started taking introductory psychology courses in high school. I started to understand how social and emotional factors played a tremendous role in the way that we think and the way that we behave. Things started to make a little bit of sense for me. But I guess it started to make a lot of sense because I ended up majoring in psychology at Jackson State University. While at Jackson State, I started to fill my classes up with social work electives. Main reason was I was trying to graduate early, which I did, so it worked. But between the social work electives and having a professor that insisted I join the social work field, noticing the amount of advocacy in the field, I did exactly that. I went on to Columbia University in New York City to pursue a Master of Social Work degree with a concentration in clinical mental health. This is the place where I had 2 amazing internships at community-based nonprofit organizations. These organizations lit a fire under me. I don't know what it was, but every day I would go there, it had me thinking, how can I create something like this for my community? How could this benefit the people that I've seen impacted the most? But it was just a thought. It wasn't until the same semester, coincidentally, I had a professor. She asked me, what are you willing to sacrifice for the population you want to serve? In my head, I'm just like, isn't choosing social work sacrifice enough? But I put some real thought into it, and I found my answer. On July 4th, 2020, it was the first time my family and I had gathered together in a while due to COVID. I can remember the smiles. I can remember the laughs. I can remember the smell of barbecue. My brother gonna throw down on barbecue every chance he gets, so it's hard to forget. But just the joy in the atmosphere. I don't know, it was something about it. I chose this day to share with my auntie who was visiting from out of town an idea that I had in my head. I had been thinking about it for a while. I walked up to her and I said, "Hey, auntie, I have this idea of this place called the Therapeutic Trap. It would act as a safe space for young adults and children who've been impacted by community violence to heal, but to heal in creative ways." So I kept going on. I started telling her more ideas, more about my vision. The first thing she said to me was, "Oh, we have to get this out of your head, Shakira." Don't ask me why she called me Shakira. I don't know. I will never know to this day. But she did exactly that. She got this idea out of my head and turned it into something so concrete. A few weeks later, I had forgot all about our conversation. It was just an idea, so I thought nothing else of it. It wasn't until I spoke to another family member, Mia. We were on the phone just chit-chatting as we do, and if you know Mia can talk. So it was at one point of the conversation, she said, "I don't know what you told Auntie or what y'all were talking about, but she loved your idea. And she also told me that she wants to help you get this idea off the ground while she still has energy." That was extremely significant to me because my aunt had been battling cancer for a while. And for her to tell someone that she wanted to spend her energy on an idea that I created in my mind, it meant the world to me. So it's safe to say that conversation didn't last much longer. I quickly called my aunt and I shared with her that, about the therapeutic trap. But who knows, that phone call would be the beginning of so much more. As I was finishing my last semester at Columbia University, I would be going in and out of classes, and I would be going on and off the subway, answering calls from my auntie, talking about different papers that needed to be signed or different documents that needed to be reviewed. The process of getting the therapeutic trap to what the therapeutic trap was a long one, but it was much easier because my auntie knew everything. I don't know how, but she did. My auntie did exactly what she said she would do. Even with us losing a family member tragically to gun violence in November, Adolph Thornton, a neighborhood hero that I aspire to be. She spent her last energy after recently passing, keeping my dream alive and putting all of her energy into the therapeutic trap. So when you ask me what am I willing to sacrifice for the population that I want to serve, it's the remainder of my energy, just like my auntie.
Thank you so much, Tierra. And thank you again to all of our storytellers. I'm sure that getting behind the mic and sharing those experiences was not easy. But I do believe that sharing those insights as we're all thinking about and trying to grapple with gun violence will be worth it to deepen our understanding of the situation and the issue confronting us. You are all brilliant, and I and WBEZ are incredibly grateful to have had you participate in this event. Truly, just thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Rodney, Takhari, David, and Tierra worked with a storytelling coach during the weeks leading up to this event. Thank you very much to Connor Gorman for helping these survivors craft their stories before sharing them with us and our virtual audience. I also want to give a special shout out to our musicians, Desert Liminal, for creating those beautiful sounds for us to listen to as we sat with the survivor stories and thought about it. You know, we were instructed here in the room not to clap after each performance, which was difficult, but it was really wonderful. So thank you so much. Thank you to Chicago Cred, UChicago Medicine, and Metropolitan Family Services for helping WBEZ connect us with all of our storytellers. And to everyone at home who's been watching, thank you for tuning in and sharing the evening with us. Please let us know what you thought about the event by filling out our post-event survey, which will be linked in the YouTube comments shortly. Have a peaceful night and a safe summer. Thank you.
Send out the bodies too loud, turn the whole world down and lean into you. Bang, bang, call up the whole gang, got a new one to use. Swear to God, you've got me all wrong, never like you and you want 'em to know. Bang, bang, call up the whole gang, got a new one to lose. Sweet William, well, I'd call you on the phone, but I don't know you. Sweet William, well, he'll make you feel right, wanna love you all the time. Breaking news, now he's on to you too. Never like you when you want him to know. Thick and thin, all I've got is pretending it's feeling that you're used to. You never wanted to be like this. Life's not like they say it is. Hold on.